My name is Victor Fuhrman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me now and we will explore these topics and so much more with fascinating guests, authors, and experts who will guide us to Destination Unlimited. Are the ideas in current popular culture reflections and retellings of myth, history, and folklore? My guest this week on Destination Unlimited, Noa Menhaim, digs down to the roots of stories, myths, and literary genres, traveling from art to politics, from history to folklore, and from high to popular culture, and back again. Noa Menhaim is an essayist, editor, lecturer, literary critic, and head of the Hebrew Literature Department at Israel's largest publishing house. She's a frequent guest on radio and television and is also known for her screenwriting, script editing, and TV series development. Her work is featured at watkinspublishing.com, and she joins me this week to share her path and new book, The Life Fantastic: Myth, History, Pop, and Folklore in the Making of Western Culture. Please join me in welcoming to Destination Unlimited, Noa Menhaim. Welcome, Noa.
Thank you. Hi. Welcome, Victor.
Thank you so much. Noa, please share your early life and what it was like growing up in Israel.
I grew up in the old city of Jerusalem. My house was right across from the Wailing Wall, from the Western Wall. So it was a very strange upbringing. I mean, we could see the Wailing Wall from our windows, and we heard the prayers there every day. And we shared a courtyard. We lived in a small, shared courtyard with two Arab families. One was a Christian family and the other was Muslim. So it was like living in this center of all these Abrahamic religions around us. And it was, I think, the only way I can describe it is magical. I think a lot of people are very nostalgic about their childhood. But there was something about this experience of living together with so many people from other faiths that was unbelievable to me. And I grew up in a religious family, in a Jewish Orthodox family, but I'm not practicing anymore. I'm a lapsed Jew, if that's even, if that's even a thing. But my parents are still observant, they're religious, but I'm not anymore. Now I live in the big city of Tel Aviv in Israel. And I think the time that I spent there was living in the old city was the last of the, I would say, peaceful time in that very fraught and politically charged area. There were not a lot of political upheaval in the time that I was growing up. It only began to get more complicated when I was in high school. So my childhood was idyllic in that sense. The Muslim family that lived next to us had two sons that were only a little older than me. Now, one was 6 and the other was 9 and I was 4. And they used to take me around the Arab market and pretend that I was their mute little sister because they couldn't speak Arabic. And everybody were really surprised to see that they had this blonde, blue-eyed, ringlet-haired little sister because they were both dark. And they were all feeling really sorry for me because I couldn't speak. So we got a lot of candies from all good wishers and used to sneak back to the house and split them between us, the spoils of our day. So there's something very, I think, comforting in knowing that this kind of existence is possible the way it used to be. And I think it also got me interested in a lot of the things that I tried to pursue in my book, which are the connections more than the things that separate us, the things that connect us, the stories that connect us.
It's interesting that your experience as a child, if we could mirror that experience amongst adults, what a different world we would have.
We would have a lot of candies to share.
A lot of candies to share, absolutely. How did the experiences of your youth shape your ultimate path?
I think part of living so steeped in history influenced me a lot. It was a place where, for listeners who don't know the area or don't know what it looks like, we had these really very heavily cobbled streets with the ancient stones. And I remember they used to dig a lot of historical sites near where I lived. They even closed our kindergarten once for 2 weeks because someone was digging in the basement and they found the remains of a villa from the First Temple period. So it's really literally a place where you couldn't put like a spade in the ground without digging out some ancient coins. It was like living inside history and surrounded by it all around you. And it made me very aware of the passing of time and also the experience of living on, I wouldn't say like sacred or hallowed ground, but on treaded ground, on one of the oldest cities in the world, and the feeling that so many feet tread the same streets where I run to school every day and play with my friends in the ruins of the old city of David, which was just a playground for us. So I think that really seeped into me.
As you grew, did the feeling become more of an energy, a visceral feeling?
I think it was always there ever since we moved there. We lived in another area of Jerusalem until I was 4. And I think I felt it from really the moment that we got the house and moved in. Jerusalem is a place, and especially the old city, so close to all the holy places of so many religions, is a very emotionally and energetically charged place. And there is a phenomenon called the Jerusalem syndrome of people arriving at the holy city, and the magnitude of history and religion and maybe also energy that they encounter causes them to, I don't know, lose their mind, be a little unhinged, believe that we had this guy that believed that he was King David incarnate and would walk around the streets and playing a lyre and wearing robes. So I think this feeling of a different energy was there all along.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. You recently tweeted the following, and I quote, "I'm a reader. Before I became a literary critic and an editor, I was a reader. But sometimes I find a story that reads me, that understands me and why I do what I do, that sees me. What a rare and wondrous thing this is, a book that looks back at you." Tell us more about your relationship with books.
They started very early. I'm dyslexic, but my dyslexia manifests itself in other ways. I mean, I was always a fast reader and I was an early reader. And I actually started reading from, I used to sneak to the Wailing Wall and try to read the notes that people left there. If your listeners don't know the tradition, it's customary to write your prayer or your wish and on a little piece of paper and then stick it in the cracks in the walls that construct the Wailing Wall as a way to approach God. And a lot of the notes drop from beneath the cracks. And when we used to go to prayer, I used to pick them up and try to read the notes, which is very bad. I know now, but I was 5. So I'm hoping that the Almighty forgives me. And since I was a very, I think, solitary child, I'm not necessarily lonely, but very solitary. So books were a lot of the times my only companions. So I was an early reader. And as I grew up, it became not only companionship and hobby, but really a vocation and a purpose and a career. I was a literary critic for about 7 years. after studying film and cinema. And then I became an editor, and I've been an editor for the last 20 years. I'm head of the Hebrew literature department at the largest publishing house in Israel. I'm managing the department, but also do a lot of editing myself. Edited more than, I think, 70 titles to this day. Mainly fiction, a little bit nonfiction, some children's books from time to time. And I truly believe it's the best work in the world. It's like the best job in the world. I'm very fortunate to have work that is in the field that really dominates my whole life.
That's wonderful. For those not familiar with the process of book editing, what is it like, and does your approach differ from other editors?
It's very hard to explain. There's something very secretive about this work that we do, because the goal is to help the authors live the full potential of their text. And once the book comes out, my job is done. I mean, we do not get a lot of praises, or, we have a very small credit inside the book. But the feeling is that the author needs to be out there in the world, and the procedure that the process, that we did together is something that is only shared between us. So not a lot of people know what editing is. I would describe it as really trying to penetrate the surface of the text to get to the backstage of it, to get to the clock mechanism that makes the book work, and see that everything is working to the best of its ability, that there's no character or plot twist or section of the book that does not function fully with the whole of it. And once I spot a problem or see that there is maybe a character that's not fully realized, or is not round enough, or this plot twist is not plotted well enough, I can work with the author to try and reach a better conclusion.
We have listeners who are writers, and I am in the process of actually writing my first solo book. I've co-written, but I'm writing my first solo book. My question to you would be, for us, for these aspiring writers and people who are in the process of writing books, any tips you can give them real fast?
Don't think about the readers while you're writing, but always think about the readers while you're editing. You write for yourself, write what you know is true and what is interesting for you. Don't think about what your colleagues would say, and what your mother would say, and what your friends would say. It's specifically hard in Israel, which is a small country, and everybody knows everybody else. So this is very difficult here not to think about the readers. Take time to write every day, even if all that you manage to write are a few lines. It doesn't matter. You have to make it into part of your daily routine. Once you finished, don't send it to the publisher right away, and also don't read it right away. Just finish writing, put it aside. One of my favorite authors usually puts his novels aside for 5 years, which is unbelievably hard, but I would not recommend 5 years, but let it sit there for a while. And surprisingly, and also almost mystically, when you go back to the text after enough time has passed, you'd find that it's changed. It's almost like a miracle, but it really isn't, because what's changed is you. And when you look at the text from, after enough time has passed, and you look at it with these new eyes, you'll be able to do some of the editing work, or at least some of the work needed on the text on your own, even before the editor steps in.
Thank you for that share. That's wonderful. Thinking about that, letting the book sort of ferment before you look at it again.
Definitely.
Wonderful. What is the nature of your columns in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz? And for those not familiar with Hebrew, what does Haaretz mean?
Haaretz means the land, or the country, and it's one of Israel's most venerated and established newspapers. And I was a writer, a contributor to the magazine section of the newspaper for about 10 years. I was fortunate enough to get a free hand to do whatever I wanted, to write about whatever I wanted, as long as it had some kind of connection to current day popular culture. So if there was a new movie that came out, it was a new television show that came out, it was a new book that came out that I felt that I could use as a stepping stone to talk about whatever it is that I wanted to, I could do that. I loved doing the column, and the freedom that it allowed me was valuable and treasured. And the chapters of the book that we're discussing today actually started there.
You've also worked as both a screenwriter and editor for film. What are some of the projects you took on?
Sadly, a lot of the projects that I worked on are still in development, so might not be familiar to your listeners. But I recently edited a television series called The Lesson that was very well received here in Israel, and recently won the Cannes Series Award for Best Series. And 2 weeks ago, we also got the Golden Bear Award from the Berlin Television Festival. So it's very well received out of Israel as well. And it's amazing to see. It's a very political TV drama, about 8 chapters. And it begins with the teacher and one of his students that get into a very charged political debate in class during civics lesson. And this very polarizing topic sends them into this really a whirlwind of recriminations and accusations that balloons and leaves the compound of the classroom and affects their personal life and even the local politics in the city where they live.
Is that going to be available here in the United States on one of the streaming services in English?
I think so. I know that there are several deals in progress as we speak. So I hope that in a few months it'll be available to watch in the States as well. And if any of your listeners are Hebrew speakers, the episodes are available in Hebrew on YouTube.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. That's wonderful. What inspired your new book, The Life Fantastic: Myth, History, Pop, and Folklore in the Making of Western Culture?
That is a mouthful.
The book title.
Yeah. Yeah, I wasn't sure about the title. I thought it was maybe a little too grand for what I was trying to do. But the really amazing team that was working with me at Watkins assured me that the book lives up to it. So I hope they're right. I think I started thinking about the book while I was writing the columns that we discussed earlier, because I started noticing that they connect with each other, that I could be writing about a new movie that came out that had witches in it. And the next day I was writing about werewolves and realizing that while Europe was going through this unbelievably horrible witch hunt, that most of its victims were women, the men were targeted as well as werewolves. So there was really not a lot of ways you could escape being prosecuted for something in Renaissance Europe. But when I realized that these different topics connect to each other and have this kind of dialogue with each other, it got me really curious about the potential of interweaving different phenomenons and tropes and iconic characters of Western civilization, and seeing how they interact with each other, what kind of connections they develop with each other over the years. And also to try and trace how ideas, thoughts, concepts evolve through the ages. And I think this is where I circle back to talking about my childhood in the fact that I lived in such a amazingly historical place in many ways. The connection between what happened here, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago, and the fact that I'm living here now was always really interesting to me. And getting to do it on a larger scale was something I really wanted to do.
My guest is Noa Menhaim. Her book, The Life Fantastic: Myth, History, Pop, and Folklore in the Making of Western Culture. Noa, please tell our listeners where they can get your book and find out more about you.
They can get the book at Watkins Publishing website. It's going to be available on Amazon and Book Depository in 2 weeks. It's coming out on the 16th. I will be in London if any of your listeners want to come to the book launch. It's going to be on the 9th of August, and it's going to be in the Watkins store, which is a miraculous place. And it's rumored that Aleister Crowley, the famous warlock, once made all the books in the store disappear and reappear. So I want to be there to find out for myself. It's also going to be available on Audible at the same time that the book is going to be out in Amazon and all the other digital platforms. And it's going to be also on the shelves in the stores. And the amazing, again, team at Watkins got me my dream of a hardcover edition of the book. So it's got a hardcover and it looks great. And I'm very ecstatic about it. It came out in Israel 3 years ago and it was a bestseller here. So fingers crossed.
Congratulations. And I know that our readership here will be welcoming your book, which will be out. I believe it's on July 16th, you had said?
Yes.
Wonderful. And we'll be back with more of Noa after these words on the OmTimes Radio Network.
The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OmTimes Radio. IOM-FM. OmTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OmTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OmTimes Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers, pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week, Noa Menhaim. We're talking about her new book, The Life Fantastic: Myth, History, Pop, and Folklore in the Making of Western Culture. Noa, this is the first book that I can ever recall having side notes with theme and page number cross-references that allow the readers to jump from an initial point to more on the subject later in the book and back and forth. I must say this is genius and wonder how your thought process created this.
Thanks. I think, first of all, maybe, I sound, pulled together and maybe even a little mildly interesting to your listeners, but I'm actually the annoying aunt that you really don't want to be seated next to at lunch or at dinner, because she's the one that's going to go, oh, I just read this amazing article, and she's going to tell you about it at length during the whole dinner. I find everything fascinating, and I cannot help myself not share it. So for me, writing in the newspaper was a very good way of channeling this sometimes maybe annoying energy into something more productive. So I think some of the side notes emerged from really my tendency to free associate and jump from one topic to another. But on a more serious note, they were the best way I could think of really weaving a net or some kind of, a web would be even better than a net, because, I like to snare people in my net, but eventually it is a web between the different topics of the book, and to keep in mind of the readers the fact that all these things that I'm discussing, and it can be from nuclear waste to Amazons to, as I mentioned before, witches and vampires, aliens and ancient gods. All these different fragments or shards of our Western civilization are actually in some way or another linked to one another. And examining these links and even being aware of them really expands our consciousness. So the side notes were the best visual way that I found to use to illustrate that concept.
And we're going to talk a little more about werewolves and vampires and witches a little later on. But how have stories from the first spoken words to early scribes and modern publishing shaped modern Western culture?
I think that as humans, we are, I think, starved for narrative from the moment of our birth. We crave narratives. We try and narrate our existence into being and try and make sense of it through stories, the stories that we tell ourselves. And tracing the history of the way that we tell stories and the kind of stories that we tell is my way of trying to trace the history of us through these repeating tropes, these continuous narratives that weave through Western culture, from Mesopotamia through to Gutenberg sitting down, working on his printing press, right to modern publishing today. I think the need for narrative is what drives us forward.
I remember being 5 or 6 years old, and I had a wonderful aunt whose name was Ada Steinberg. And the very first thing I would see every time I'd see her is, "Hi, Aunt Ada," give her a hug and say, "Tell me a story." And she was a wonderful storyteller.
Oh, how lucky you were.
And is that something that's missing from our society today?
I'm the kind of mother that still sits with her 10-year-old son every evening and tells him a story. He's very much into Greek myths now because I'm reading Percy Jackson to him. So we have all these engaged conversation on which deity is stronger. And if you were a demigod, what kind of divine parent would you want to have? So I think that there is a real need for storytelling. And I see it in my work in television. I see it in my work in literature. I don't think that we are in a real post-narrative world. I think that the need is still there, and we're just looking for new ways to tell stories.
You share real-life stories that inspired characters that were found in many famous and well-loved children's books. Can you share a couple of those with us?
I think one of the saddest examples, actually, that I can think of was Winnie the Pooh, because we see Millen's work as being this really warm-hearted, naive existence in the idyllic forest where Winnie the Pooh and Piglet and all their friends live. And we all remember the image of Christopher Robin and his stuffed animals, and he's going down the stairs and pulling Winnie after him, and his head is like bouncing on the steps as he walks. And it is true that these animals were part of Christopher Millen, his son's retinue of stuffed animal friends. But in later times, when he grew up and he published his own memoirs, he claimed that his father never understood children, that he bought him all these stuffed animals for literary purposes. I mean, he would think about what would be the best companion to put into the story, and then buy him the donkey or the kangaroo, and introduce them into his life and into the fiction that he was writing at the time. At the same time, and he expressed a feeling of being robbed of his childhood in favor of these fictional stories that his father wrote and was so beloved by so many people. And I remember that when I was doing the research on this particular chapter, and it also includes stories about the author of Mary Poppins, about Charles Dodson, the author of Alice in Wonderland, Lewis Carroll, about James Matthew Barrie that wrote Peter Pan. And I was really struck by the way that the children of these authors paid the price for these amazing, fantastical landscape that their fathers constructed and delighted so many children. But the authors' children themselves were robbed of their childhood and the progress. In some way, they were prisoners in Never Never Land. While we got to visit it and then go back to our homes, they were stuck there by their parents, who used their bedtime stories, their little vignettes, and their, the experience of their childhood in order to create these really immortal landscape of like an Arcadia of childhood that we as readers admire so much.
My mother-in-law used to share an old expression, the shoemaker's children never have shoes.
My father is a shoemaker, and he always criticizes the footwear that I choose. So I think he would wholeheartedly agree with her.
But the concept being that whatever we bring to the world, we sometimes forget to give to our children.
That is so true. Yeah.
In The Life Fantastic, you connect ancient myth with modern superheroes. Tell us a little about Aquaman and Atlantis and Wonder Woman and ancient Greece.
Well, I would begin by saying that for me, superhero comics is the modern day pantheons of the gods. A lot of them draw on ancient concepts and depict reincarnation of ancient gods. But even if we didn't have that characteristic or that element, we would be able to address them and see them as modern day mythical pantheons. And it's specifically interesting in these characters that really draw on ancient myths like Aquaman and Wonder Woman. So Aquaman was created by two Jewish guys. And like many other superheroes of the time, we're talking about the 40s, he was recruited to fight in World War II. It's like you have images of Captain America or Superman as they punch Hitler. And Aquaman was sent to intercept German submarines. So a lot of these comic artists, being aware of the situation of their people, the Jewish people in Europe, used their art and gave superpowers to their heroes in order to fight the fight that they could not take part of. So I think Aquaman is very interesting in that regard. And the other interesting thing about him is that we know, of course, because it's all true, all these stories, that he descended from Atlantis. Now, the Germans, especially Nazis who were very interested in occult, believed that the Aryan race actually originated from Atlantis. And in placing Aquaman in Atlantis and claiming that he is a descendant of this mythical island that appeared first in the writings of the Greeks and was supposedly submerged under the sea, The fact that they place Aquaman there is a way of also telling the Nazis occult fans we're colonizing even this submerged mythical island. We're taking it away from you and we're giving it to one of our heroes. This is the Untermensch, as the Nazis liked to describe the Jews, becoming the Übermensch, becoming the Superman. So this is one of the ways that Aquaman expresses this really trend that was very common among comic writers and illustrators in the 40s of using their characters in order to fight the war that America hasn't joined yet by that point in time.
And Wonder Woman.
And Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman is one of the Amazons. And the stories about the Amazons are, of course, much older than the comic character of Wonder Woman, and they appear in the writings of, as I mentioned before, the Greeks. And there was a lot of debate whether this was an actual tribe of female warriors or only a myth, only a story that the Greeks wanted to emphasize in order to glorify themselves. They could conquer any kind of foe, even these fierce, unbelievably strong and loyal women that denounced the company of men and were very well trained. And there's always an element of romance in conquering them because they can win on the battlefield and then they can win in the bedroom. But there are not a lot of archaeological finds that supported the fact that a tribe like this ever existed. In recent years, though, it was discovered that a lot of the skeletons that were considered to be those of male warriors from the area near the Black Sea, that was supposedly the land the Amazons came from, they were cataloged as male skeletons because they were buried with their swords and shields and armor. But recent examination reveals that a lot of them were of women, of female warriors, buried with all this, accoutrements of war with them, which suggests that they were warriors. So it is possible that a tribe of fierce female warriors existed. And they were the original Amazons that Diana, Princess of the Amazons, the Wonder Woman, is supposedly one of their descendants.
In 1966, when I was 13, I had an opportunity to interview for my junior high school newspaper the publisher of DC Comics about Superman and other superheroes. He said the popularity stemmed from a hero vacuum that real-life heroes were not present to fill. Are we once again experiencing, in your opinion, a hero vacuum?
I believe that we are living in maybe not more than a hero vacuum. It's like a very unheroic moment in time. Heroism has become connected and maybe even tainted by association with words like patriotism or nationalism. And it's hard for us to see heroism as something that is a personality trait more than a political subject. And so I think that the proliferation of comic hero movies nowadays really expresses not only the thirst and hunger that we have for heroes, but also our disbelief. A lot of these narratives deal with the breakdown of society through the introduction of superheroes into it. I mean, they're even vilified and seem to be something that is destructive to our society. It's a critique of the hero's role. I don't think that we like heroes as much as we used to. And for me, as someone who, my favorite form is the epic. Yeah. It's sad.
Absolutely. My guest, Noa Menhaim. Her book, The Life Fantastic, will be back with more of Noa after these words on the OmTimes Radio Network.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free, ascendinghearts.com.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on OmTimes Radio.
So I'm a cat, and I just moved in with this new human, and she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week, she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? Egg rolls showed up. Like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for inspired conversations with publisher Linda Joy on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
Look out, world, we're getting strong. The future's here and we belong. She can STEM, she can do more. Like build a rocket and watch it soar. Or clean the oceans and make the world a better place. Oh, she can STEM, so can you. Find a cure, invent something new. There's no challenge in the world that she can't face. She can STEM.
Learn more at She Can STEM. A message brought to you by the Ad Council.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week, Noa Menhaim. Our book is called The Life Fantastic: Myth, History, Pop, and Folklore in the Making of Western Culture. Throughout history, and here I have to function as an apologist for my gender, many of my gender have attempted to subjugate and suppress women. The recent Supreme Court ruling on abortion rights and the reactionary response by state governments is only the most recent example. What is the genesis, and there's no pun intended here, of this long disempower struggle?
Well, we need to go way, way, way back in order to find where everything began. And I think for us in the the Abrahamic religions, also the Judeo-Christian faiths, it starts with this very difficult scene of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. It's first of all worth noting that Eve was not Adam's first choice, was not even God's first choice. There are two creation myths for man in the Bible. The first one is that man and woman were created in God's image. And only in the second one is the famous scene of God removing one of Adam's ribs in order to create Eve. There are heaps of books written on this difference between these two creation myths. But I think they also represent two very different ways of seeing the state of gender relations, whether it is you believe that men and women were created equal in God's image, or that you believe that the woman is derived from the man, is somehow a part of him, is somehow subjected to him because she was first a limb of, one of his limbs or one of his parts. And when we take this story on to the famous scene of the snake that's seducing Eve, and the fact that Adam did not wait for 1 second when, God asked him, who told you to eat from the fruit? We tell our children that it's not nice to tell. Adam didn't think for a minute and immediately said that the woman seduced me and gave me this fruit. And I think that this is the moment that we see a lot of even current views on what a woman should or should not do. Does she have the freedom of choice on her body and her person and herself? We can trace a lot of it back to that really dramatic scene there in the Garden of Eden. And it even goes as far as some of the Hebrew scholars discussing this scene claimed that the snake did not only seduce the woman and offered her the fruit, but also impregnated her. And that Cain, the first murderer, is actually not the son of Adam, but the son of the snake. So, delving into this story, we see so many of the really poisonous and destructive strands of thought that we see manifested even to this day.
In that regard, then, why does the feminine divine stand out in so many other cultures and religions?
I think the monotheistic order is very gendered. It's very male. And a lot of the pagan religions and belief systems that it replaced really placed a lot of emphasis on the feminine. I wouldn't go as far as to say that that we have evidence, archaeological evidence, to suggest that there were feminine matriarchies that we can necessarily identify, but it's obvious that there were very strong female deities in charge of very serious matters. They were in charge of fate. They were in charge of battles. They were in charge of, the length of a man's life and his lot during them. And once the concept of one God and a male God enters these really geographical spaces where paganism was practiced and female deities had their place and had their significance, the monotheistic God has to conquer them, has to change them, has to get rid of them, because it's, if there's only one God, and then could be no competition, and women is even worse competition, because a woman can create. And if you are dealing with one creator God, a deity, which is gendered and is male, and he is the creator, then having competition that can do this miraculous thing and produce life from itself is something that is threatening to you.
Do you think there's going to be another feminine revolution?
I truly hope so. I think we need one. I think that there is a very dangerous backlash that we're experiencing nowadays, and I don't think that we're even close to the peak of it. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. Everything that I've read and everything that I was told suggests that it might not get better before it gets a little worse.
A living horror story, and you talk a lot about horror stories in your book. Growing up in the 1950s and 60s, I was obsessed with classic horror stories and films. You led a horror story writing workshop last year. What secrets did you reveal about the genre, and how is this reflected in your book?
I think the first lesson I've learned about horror in general is the lesson that Mary Shelley, the woman who wrote Frankenstein, taught me. She describes in her diaries how she came to write about this mad scientist and his monster. And she went to sleep. She had a nightmare. She woke and she wrote in her diary that she saw in her mind's eye this student standing above the prone body of the creature that he created, that he breathed life into. And then she added, what frightened me will surely frighten others as well. And I think this is a very important lesson, that there are fears that we all share, that sometimes we feel alone in feeling them. We think that no one else is afraid of the things that we are scared of, but there are fundamental and primal fears that we all share. And writing horror and reading horror and watching horror is something that releases a lot of these lonely and terrified feelings that we're not really expected to express in today's very organized and orderly society. It's an outlet for a lot of these anxieties that we experience and have no other outlet for.
Talk a little more about vampires and the Wolfman.
Two of my most beloved monsters. I think vampires really went through an amazing evolution. We meet them for the first time if we, skip forward and not discuss creatures like Lamia or other mythological creatures that drink the blood of humans, and jump straight through to what we would recognize as vampires. They used to lurk in churchyards and drink the blood of innocent bystanders, but they were very ugly, wretched creatures. A little bit like we see ghouls today, maybe. And then possibly the very first night that Mary Shelley had that nightmare about Victor Frankenstein and his monster, a young doctor who's the physician of Lord Byron was sleeping a few rooms away from her. They were both vacationing in Lake Geneva in Switzerland. And he was writing about a vampire. And he had a very tumultuous relationship with Lord Byron, his employer. And he cast him in the character of this vampire and created the first recognizable image of this monster. He's urbane, he's sophisticated, he's seductive. He likes to hunt for beautiful women amongst the hautons, and he's more like vampire that we know today. But this character, one of the most interesting things about her was the use that the different cultures made of her. For the Germans, for instance, for the Nazis, and it's also expressed in Hitler's Mein Kampf, the Jew was the vampire. He was the absolute other. He was unnatural. He was a leech. He was feeding off this race of werewolves, these fierce warriors connected to the land, connected to their country. And while we, the Jews, were the vampires, the Aryans were the werewolves. They were pure, and the Jewish people was this parasite on their race. And today we are at a totally different phase in the evolution of the vampire. where he's sexy again. But he also has a soul, which is something that vampires lacked for many years. He feels remorse. He feels disgusted with himself a lot of the times. There's a lot of self-hatred involved in being a vampire these days. My black cat is meowing in the background in consent. This is what you're hearing. So I think that the vampire is one of the monsters that made the largest evolutionary leaps in recent years.
And so much and more is featured in Noa's book, The Life Fantastic: Myth, History, Pop, and Folklore in the Making of Western Culture. Noa, please tell our listeners one more time where they can get your book and find out more about you.
You can find more about me on Facebook. My handle is Noa Menhaim, or you can buy the book at Watkins's publishing website, Amazon Book Depository. It's going to be distributed to stores in the UK and the US on the 16th of July. And the audio version of the book is also coming out at the same time.
Noa, this has been absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your experience and your gifts.
Thank you so much, Victor. It's been an absolute pleasure.
And thank you for joining us on Destination Unlimited. I'm Victor, the Voice Fuhrman. Have a wonderful week.